A hospital waiting room, bright lights, the silence before the storm. A pregnant woman sits alone, gently holding her belly, when her husband's mistress walks in with a smile sharp as a blade. Words turn to poison, and then it happens. The shove that sends the woman crashing to the floor as nurses scream for help. But no one knows that this very moment will ignite a war for truth and power, led by her billionaire father, a man who does not forgive and never forgets. What follows is betrayal, justice, and redemption, like you've never seen before. Tell us what time you're watching and where you're tuning in from. Leave a comment below. The fluorescent lights of Lenox Hill Hospital hummed faintly above the waiting room, their sterile glow reflected off the glass walls, painting everything in a cold, bluish tint. Amelia Hartman sat on the far end of the row of gray chairs, one hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. At 7 months pregnant, she had learned to wait alone. Her phone screen lit up with the time 10:17 a.m. Her husband was late again. She stared at her reflection in the glass. A pale face, tired eyes, the faint shadow of someone who once believed in fairy tales. Behind her, the television whispered about stock markets and celebrity scandals, the kind of noise that belonged to another world. A nurse passed by and smiled kindly. "Your appointment should be soon, Mrs. Hartman." Amelia returned the smile, but it felt heavy, as if her face had forgotten how. She scrolled through her phone and paused on the ultrasound photo saved as her wallpaper, the tiny outline of a baby's hand. Her thumb brushed the screen gently. "You're my reason," she whispered. The world outside the glass was gray and indifferent. Manhattan mornings always were. The automatic doors hissed open, cutting through the hum of machines. The sound of heels clicked against the polished floor. Every head turned, including hers. Selena Drake entered the room with the kind of confidence that burned everything around her. Her perfume arrived before she did, a sharp, intoxicating scent of jasmine and arrogance. She wore a cream blazer, diamond earrings, and a smile that could slice through silk. When their eyes met, the air changed. Amelia froze. The last time she had seen Selena was through tabloid photos, those glossy shots of her husband, Nathaniel Cross, dining with the mysterious brunette at the Ritz-Carlton. Selena had been the shadow behind the rumors, the woman everyone whispered about but no one dared to confront. Until now. Selena's voice was soft but soaked in venom. "Still pretending you're the wife, Amelia?" Her lips curled upward, the tone almost playful. "You must be exhausted keeping up appearances." Amelia's pulse quickened. She wanted to stand, to leave, to vanish. "This isn't the place," she said quietly. "Please, just go." Selena tilted her head, pretending to think. "Oh, but it's the perfect place. A hospital, full of witnesses, full of pity." She leaned closer, her diamond bracelet glinting under the light. "He's done with you. You're nothing but an inconvenient headline now." Amelia looked down, trying to control the tremor in her hands. "You should leave." Selena laughed softly, the kind of laugh meant to humiliate. "Leave? Why should I? You've had everything handed to you. The name, the house, the money. You think Nathaniel married you for love?" The words stabbed deeper than Amelia expected. She bit her lip, holding back tears. "You don't know anything about us." Selena smiled wider. "I know enough." Her bag brushed against Amelia's knee, deliberate and slow. Then, with one swift movement, she shoved Amelia's shoulder. Hard. The world tilted. The metal chair screeched against the tile as Amelia fell backward. The sound of her cry tore through the waiting room. Pain exploded across her abdomen. She tried to breathe, but the air had turned thick and heavy. Nurses screamed. One shouted for security. Someone hit the alarm. Selena's expression shifted for a split second, from victory to panic. The color drained from her face. Her phone slipped from her hand, clattering across the floor. The screen cracked. For one surreal moment, Amelia saw her own reflection splintered in that broken glass. Then everything blurred, the sound of rushing footsteps, the scent of disinfectant, the cold sting of fear. She gasped for air, clutching her belly as tears streamed down her face. "My baby," she whispered. "Please, not my baby." Two nurses reached her and lowered her onto a gurney. The fluorescent lights above blurred into streaks of white. Her gown clung to her skin, damp with sweat and panic. One nurse shouted, "Room 4 now!" Another held Amelia's hand tightly. "Stay with me. Just breathe." Selina stumbled backward. Her perfect posture was gone. She looked around as the crowd stared in shock. A man near the door yelled, "Did she push her?" Selina's voice broke. "It was an accident." She backed toward the exit, heels slipping on the floor. A silver bracelet slipped from her wrist and rolled beneath a chair, the initials SD engraved faintly on its side. By the time the security guard arrived, Selina had already fled through the sliding doors, the sound of her heels echoing down the hallway. Inside, Amelia's world narrowed to a heartbeat. The rhythmic beeping of the monitor beside her was the only proof that life still existed. The pain came in waves, deep and sharp. She could feel every throb of her pulse against the cold metal rail. "You're going to be all right," a nurse repeated, voice trembling but hopeful. The gurney burst through the emergency doors. White coats surrounded her. The words blurred together: 7 months, possible trauma, fetal distress. The oxygen mask pressed against her face, fogging with every shallow breath. As they pushed her into the exam room, Amelia's vision dimmed. She could hear voices, but they sounded far away, like echoes underwater. Somewhere outside that sterile chaos, rain began to tap against the windows. She imagined the city carrying on, unaware of the life that might be ending inside this cold room. In another part of Manhattan, Nathaniel Cross was seated in a boardroom on the top floor of Cross Holdings, laughing with investors. The skyline gleamed behind him, untouched by consequence. His phone buzzed once, then twice. The caller ID read, "Lenox Hill Emergency." He ignored it, sliding the phone face down on the table. 2 minutes later, across the same city, Alexander Hartman stood by the window of his office at Hartman Capital. His silver hair caught the morning light as his assistant rushed in, holding an iPad. "Sir, there's been an incident at the hospital. It's your daughter." For a moment, Alexander didn't move. The sound of his own heartbeat drowned out the room. Then he turned slowly, eyes cold as the rain outside. "Get my car," he said. "We're going to Lenox Hill." Back inside the hospital, Amelia felt her consciousness slipping. The sterile ceiling lights faded into soft halos. The nurses' voices grew distant. She reached for the air, fingers trembling, searching for something solid to hold. Her lips moved, barely audible. "Please, save my child." Then darkness came, thick, silent, absolute. And as the storm outside broke open, the first chapter of her reckoning began. The rain began to fall just as Alexander Hartman's car turned onto Fifth Avenue. The wipers moved in slow, angry arcs, cutting through the silver streaks on the windshield. Inside the back seat of the black Mercedes, Alexander sat in silence. His phone screen still glowed with the message from Lenox Hill Hospital. "Your daughter has been admitted. Condition critical." He had read those words 6 times, each time slower, as if repetition could make them mean something else. But they did not change. Nothing did. For a man who had controlled billion-dollar markets with a single phone call, Alexander now felt powerless. Across the city, sirens echoed faintly through the rain. His reflection in the tinted glass looked older than it had that morning. The silver in his hair seemed sharper, his eyes darker. His assistant, Lucas Reed, sat in the passenger seat, scrolling through updates from the hospital. "They say she's stable but still unconscious," Lucas said quietly. "The doctors are monitoring both her and the baby." Alexander didn't answer. He kept his gaze fixed on the blur of headlights outside. "Who called it in?" he finally asked. "The nurse at reception," Lucas replied. "Apparently there was an altercation." Alexander turned his head. "What kind of altercation?" Lucas hesitated. "A woman attacked her." The words hung in the air like smoke. Alexander leaned back, his jaw tightening. "A woman?" "Yes, sir. They're checking the security footage now. The police have already been informed." The car slowed as they reached the hospital entrance. Paparazzi were not there yet, but they would be soon. Alexander knew how quickly Manhattan devoured stories like this. A billionaire's daughter, attacked in public, was a headline too tempting to resist. He stepped out of the car before the driver could open the door. The cold rain hit his face, but he did not flinch. Inside the hospital lobby, nurses whispered as he walked past. His presence carried a quiet gravity, the kind that silenced rooms without a word. He went straight to the reception desk. "Amelia Hartman," he said. "Where is she?" The nurse recognized him instantly. "Room 7, intensive observation." He nodded once and started down the hall, his shoes echoing against the linoleum. Each step felt heavier than the last. Through the glass window of room 7, he saw her, his daughter. Tubes, monitors, white sheets, pale skin. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor filled the silence. For a moment, Alexander could not breathe. The last time he had seen her was 2 weeks earlier at the family townhouse. They had argued about Nathaniel, about loyalty, about pride. She had left in tears, telling him that he cared more about reputation than happiness. Now she lay before him, fragile and still. The father who had once believed money could fix everything realized how wrong he had been. A doctor approached quietly. "Mr. Hartman, your daughter is stable for now. There was abdominal trauma, but the baby's heartbeat remains strong. We've sedated her to keep her calm." Alexander nodded slowly. "Will she recover?" "With rest, yes, but she will need constant monitoring. The stress alone could trigger complications." He looked through the glass again. "And the person who did this?" "We're identifying her now," the doctor replied. "Security is reviewing footage. The police are already involved." Alexander's voice lowered. "Make sure the footage is secured, no leaks." "Of course." Lucas stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Sir, should I notify the press office?" "No," Alexander said firmly. "Not a single word until we know everything. I won't let them turn my daughter's pain into a spectacle." He turned back toward the room. The soft rise and fall of Amelia's chest was the only movement in the sterile light. He placed a hand against the glass, his reflection overlapping hers. "I failed you," he whispered. "But I will not fail you again." For the first time in years, Alexander Hartman felt something that money could not soothe. Fear. The kind of fear that stripped a man of armor and left only truth behind. Lucas cleared his throat. "There's another update, sir. The security office just called. They found a bracelet at the scene. Tiffany. Engraved initials. SD. Alexander froze. The initials triggered recognition instantly. Selena Drake, Nathaniel's PR consultant, the mistress his daughter had pretended not to know about. He straightened slowly. "Get me the footage," he said. Minutes later, in a small room behind the nurse's station, the hospital's head of security queued up the video. Grainy black and white footage filled the monitor. The waiting room, Amelia sitting quietly, Selena entering, confident, calculated. They exchanged words. Then, the shove, the fall, the chaos. When the clip ended, Alexander said nothing. His jaw flexed once, then again. "Copy this," he ordered. "Secure the original. Deliver a copy to my office and one to the police." Lucas nodded and turned to leave, but Alexander's voice stopped him. "Find out where Nathaniel Cross is right now." "He's in a board meeting at Cross Holdings," Lucas replied. "Tell him to come here immediately. If he refuses, leak the footage directly to the district attorney." "Yes, sir." Alexander returned to the window outside his daughter's room. The rain outside had turned to a steady drizzle, washing streaks down the glass. He could see his own reflection beside her sleeping form. The once invincible titan of finance now looked like an aging man clinging to purpose. His phone buzzed, a call from Nathaniel's assistant. He ignored it. Then another buzz, a text message. "I heard what happened. I'm on my way." Alexander read the words without emotion. He knew exactly what kind of man Nathaniel was. Charming, calculating, and cowardly. The type who ran when things got difficult and returned only when he needed forgiveness. When Nathaniel finally arrived, 2 hours had passed. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and he stepped out, immaculate as ever, wearing a navy suit and the same arrogance he wore to every gala. He spotted Alexander at the end of the corridor and approached with feigned urgency. "Mr. Hartman," he began. "I came as soon as I heard." Alexander turned slowly. "You heard 2 hours ago." His voice was calm, but the anger beneath it vibrated like a storm held inside glass. "And your mistress attacked my daughter." Nathaniel's composure cracked. "That's impossible. Selena would never—" Alexander cut him off. "Save it. I've seen the footage." Nathaniel's color drained. "She said it was an accident." "An accident doesn't come with initials carved in silver," Alexander said coldly. "You brought a viper into our family, and now she's drawn blood." The hallway went silent. Nathaniel opened his mouth, but no words came. Alexander turned away, his hand tightening around his phone. "Leave this place," he said quietly. "You've done enough damage for one lifetime." As Nathaniel walked away, the rain outside intensified. Alexander watched him disappear down the corridor, then looked once more at his daughter. Her heartbeat monitor beeped steadily, fragile but persistent. He closed his eyes, whispered a silent vow, and let the storm wash over the city that would soon learn what it meant to awaken the wrath of a father. When Amelia opened her eyes, the world looked strange, as if it had been drained of color. The hospital room was silent except for the rhythmic beeping of a monitor beside her bed. Her throat felt dry, and her lips cracked when she tried to speak. A nurse appeared almost instantly, adjusting the oxygen line near her nose. "You're safe now, Mrs. Hartman," the nurse said softly. "Your father is here. The baby's heartbeat is strong. You just need to rest." Amelia's eyes fluttered. Her voice came out as a whisper. "My baby, is he really okay?" The nurse smiled gently. "Yes, he's a fighter." Amelia let out a shaky breath and closed her eyes again, tears slipping down her temples. Every muscle in her body ached, but the sound of that steady heartbeat was enough to quiet the chaos inside her chest. Through the glass window of the ICU room, Alexander Hartman stood perfectly still. The light from the hallway cut a faint reflection across the glass, showing his face layered over his daughter's fragile form. He had faced boardroom wars, hostile takeovers, and Senate investigations. But nothing had ever made him feel as powerless as this. Lucas Reed stood beside him, holding a manila folder and an iPad. His tone was steady, but his expression was grim. "The police have taken a statement from the hospital staff," he said. "They're confirming what we already know. The attacker was Selena Drake." Alexander didn't move. His voice was quiet, yet sharp. "Where is she now?" "She fled the scene before security arrived," Lucas replied. "But she dropped something. A Tiffany bracelet. The initials SD. It's in police custody." Alexander's hand tightened around the edge of the window frame. "Has Nathaniel said anything?" Lucas hesitated. "He's still at the hospital. The press is already circling outside, but we've contained the story for now." "No." Alexander's gaze never left Amelia. Her skin looked pale against the white sheets, her hands resting lightly over her belly. He thought of the last argument they'd had. She had accused him of choosing image over empathy. He had told her she was naive, that she did not understand how the world worked. Now he saw how wrong he had been. He turned slowly toward Lucas. "I want every detail," he said. "Every call, every message between Nathaniel and that woman. Trace her accounts, her movements, her contracts with Cross Holdings." Lucas nodded. "Already in motion. Our legal team is standing by." The nurse opened the door gently and stepped out. "She's asking for you," she said. Alexander entered quietly. The beeping of machines softened as he approached. He sat down beside the bed and took his daughter's hand. Her fingers were cold and trembling. When she opened her eyes, he saw the confusion in them. "Dad," she whispered. "What happened?" He swallowed hard. "You were attacked, but you're safe now. I saw the footage." Her lips parted in disbelief. "Footage?" "Yes," he said. "Security cameras caught everything. The police have it, and so do I." Her hand tightened weakly around his. "I don't want the world to see it. Please. I can't live through that again." Alexander looked down, his eyes heavy. "This isn't about publicity. It's about justice." She shook her head slowly. "I just want peace." "Run?" For a long moment he didn't answer. Then he said quietly, "You will have peace, but first, they will have consequences." A tear slid down her cheek. "Dad, don't make this another war." He looked at her, the hardness in his face softening. "It already is one, sweetheart. You just didn't start it." Outside the room, Lucas received a message on his tablet. He returned a few minutes later and leaned close to Alexander. "Sir, we have confirmation. Selena Drake's last known location was a downtown loft near Tribeca. NYPD is preparing a warrant. There's also chatter online. Someone leaked partial details about the hospital incident. It's trending." Alexander stood abruptly. "Trending where?" "Social media," Lucas replied. "A gossip account posted something vague. It mentions a pregnant socialite involved in a violent altercation. They didn't use Amelia's name, but people are already speculating." Alexander's voice turned cold. I want it buried. Find whoever leaked it and make them disappear from every platform they use." Lucas nodded quickly. "Understood." Inside the room, Amelia could hear faint murmurs from the hallway. She turned her head toward the window. Through the reflection, she saw her father's silhouette, a man who looked more like a general preparing for battle than a father watching over his child. She knew that look too well. It was the same one he had worn at her mother's funeral, the day he promised he would never let anyone hurt their family again. Her chest tightened. She wanted to stop him, but exhaustion held her down. Moments later, Alexander stepped back into the room. "I have to go for a few hours," he said softly. "There are things to arrange." "Arrange?" she asked weakly. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Rest, Amelia. Let me take care of the rest." Legren. When he left, the nurse adjusted the IV line and whispered, "He hasn't left your side since you came in." Amelia smiled faintly. That sounds like him. The rain outside had stopped, but the clouds still hung low over Manhattan. In the hospital lobby, Alexander paused near the elevator. Lucas joined him, holding a tablet that displayed the paused frame of the security video. Selena's hand pushing Amelia, the cold glint in her eyes, and the chaos that followed. Alexander studied the image for a long time. "She wanted power," he murmured. "She's about to learn what it really looks like." Lucas said nothing. He knew what that tone meant. As they exited the hospital, photographers were already waiting near the entrance, their lenses glinting under the wet streetlights. Alexander's security team blocked them off while he entered the car. The door closed, shutting out the shouts of questions and flashing cameras. Inside the quiet of the car, Alexander stared out at the blurred city lights. Every reflection on the window looked like a wound he could not heal. "They nearly killed my grandchild," he said softly, almost to himself. "They thought this would break her. Instead, they just woke me up." Lucas looked at him through the mirror. "What are we going to do?" Alexander's eyes hardened. "We exposed them both." The car merged into traffic, its taillights glowing red against the wet asphalt. Inside the hospital, Amelia slept beneath the steady hum of machines, unaware that outside those walls, her father had just declared a quiet, merciless war. And somewhere downtown, in a loft lit by city neon, Selena Drake stared at her cracked phone, watching headlines appear. For the first time, her perfect smile faded, because she, too, had just seen the man behind the glass. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, revealing Nathaniel Cross in a tailored navy suit. His shoes clicked against the hospital floor as if nothing in the world could disturb his balance. He carried himself with the same false confidence that had once charmed investors and broken hearts. But today, the mask cracked at the edges. Reporters were outside, rumors were spreading, and somewhere in this building, his wife lay broken because of the woman he swore was only a business partner. Lynn. He spotted Alexander Hartman at the end of the corridor, standing like a monument of authority beside the glass wall of the intensive care room. The older man's back was straight, his hands folded behind him. For a moment, Nathaniel hesitated. Then he took a breath and walked forward. "Mr. Hartman," he began, his voice low and controlled. "I came as soon as I heard." Alexander turned slowly. His expression did not soften. "You heard 2 hours ago." "Lo." Nathaniel opened his mouth, but the words caught. "I was in a meeting. I couldn't just walk out." "You couldn't walk out," Alexander repeated, his tone calm yet heavy. "But you could ignore 12 missed calls. You could ignore your wife lying unconscious after your mistress attacked her. Tell me, Nathaniel, how many more meetings are more important than her life?" The hallway seemed to shrink. A nurse passed quietly, avoiding their eyes. Nathaniel's throat tightened. "Selena said it was a misunderstanding," he said weakly. "She didn't mean to hurt her." Alexander stepped closer. The scent of rain and disinfectant filled the air between them. "A misunderstanding?" His voice dropped lower. "I watched the footage. I saw her hand. She shoved Amelia. Your wife fell because of the woman you chose to bring into her life." Nathaniel looked away, his jaw trembling. "She said Amelia provoked her." Alexander's eyes darkened. "Provoked her? A pregnant woman sitting in a waiting room provoked her? That is the story you are going to believe?" "I'm not saying she's innocent," Nathaniel stammered. "I just think there's more to the story." "There is," Alexander said coldly. "The story of a man who traded integrity for ambition, who looked at my daughter's loyalty and saw it as leverage. You built your empire on my name, Nathaniel, and now you will watch it collapse because of your own. Ah! The silence that followed was heavier than shouting. Nathaniel's chest rose and fell as he searched for words that could bridge the distance between them. None came. He finally said, "I love her, Alexander. You have to believe that." Alexander almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. Love does not abandon. Love does not humiliate. And love does not stand by while another woman tries to destroy the mother of your child. The words struck deep. Nathaniel felt the ground tilt under him. He wanted to protest, to plead. But the look in Alexander's eyes silenced him. It was not the anger of a father. It was the judgment of a man who had seen every form of deceit and could smell another one from a mile away. The door to Amelia's room slid open slightly. Inside, she lay sleeping beneath the soft light of the monitor. Nathaniel's eyes softened when he saw her. "Can I see her?" he asked quietly. Alexander blocked the door. "No, please," Nathaniel whispered. "I just want to make sure she's okay." "You have done enough," Alexander replied. "Go home. Or better yet, go to your office and start preparing for what comes next." "What do you mean?" "I mean the world will see you for what you are." Lucas Reed appeared from the far end of the hallway, holding a tablet. "Sir," he said to Alexander, "the copy of the footage is ready. Police have it, and our team secured the digital backup." Nathaniel's eyes widened. "You gave it to the police?" Alexander's tone did not change. "Of course. You think this will stay private? You think money can bury what the truth already exposed?" Nathaniel stepped forward. "Alexander, please. If this becomes public, it will destroy everything I've built." "Good," Alexander said simply. "Maybe then you'll understand what it feels like to lose something worth more than money." Nathaniel's voice cracked. "You can't do this! You can't ruin me over one mistake! You come." "One mistake," Alexander repeated slowly. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is missing dinner. This was an assault on a pregnant woman, on my daughter. That is not a mistake. That is moral rot." Lucas glanced between them, sensing the tension growing. "Sir," he said softly, "should I contact our legal team now?" Alexander nodded, eyes still locked on Nathaniel. "Yes, begin the filings." Nathaniel took a step back, panic flickering behind his polished exterior. "What filings?" "The termination of your partnership with Hartman Capital, effective immediately." Nathaniel's face drained of color. "You can't be serious. That company exists because of me." "No," Alexander replied. "It exists because my daughter believed in you, because I funded your dreams when you had none of your own. You took advantage of that trust and turned it into poison. You should thank her for giving you the chance to pretend to be a man." Nathaniel clenched his fists. "You think you can just erase me?" Alexander's eyes were like ice. "No, I don't need to erase you. You are already erasing yourself." Lucas handed Nathaniel a folder. Inside was a single-page document bearing the company seal. His hands trembled as he read the title, Notice of Dissolution and Withdrawal of Financial Backing. It was over. His world, his reputation, his illusion of control, all slipping through his fingers. He looked up, desperation breaking through the last of his pride. "Alexander, please, think about Amelia. Think about the baby. Do you want your grandchild to grow up hearing his father was ruined by his grandfather?" Alexander's voice softened, but only slightly. "I want my grandchild to grow up knowing that lies have consequences, that strength is not silence, that a man's worth is not measured by the size of his bank account, but by the integrity he carries when no one is watching." Nathaniel's shoulders collapsed. He nodded once, then turned away. As he walked down the corridor, his reflection flickered in the glass walls, smaller, weaker, fading with every step. Inside the hospital room, Amelia stirred. Her eyes fluttered open just as her father re-entered. "Was he here?" she asked faintly. Alexander sat beside her. "He was, and he's gone now." She stared at the ceiling, a tear sliding down her cheek. "Good." Outside, thunder rolled across Manhattan, shaking the windows. Alexander looked out at the rain, his reflection merging with the city lights. He whispered to himself, "You tried to build an empire on my name. Now you'll learn what happens when that name fights back." The storm raged through the night, and for the first time in years, Alexander Hartman allowed himself to feel something rare. Not victory, not anger, but the raw, unfiltered power of a father who had nothing left to lose. The storm had passed by morning, but the sky above Manhattan was still bruised with gray. From the 42nd floor of Hartman Capitol, the city stretched below like a chessboard, waiting for its next move. Inside the glass conference room, Alexander Hartman stood at the head of a long oak table, surrounded by his inner circle. Lawyers, analysts, and cybersecurity specialists filled the seats, their screens glowing with reports and open files. The mood was tense but focused. Everyone knew that when Alexander called a meeting this early, something was about to change. He looked down at the folder in front of him, then raised his eyes to the room. "This is not a personal vendetta," he said calmly. "This is damage control. My daughter was attacked in a public hospital, and the people responsible will face both justice and consequence." Lucas Reed, seated to his right, tapped on his tablet. "We've secured the footage from the hospital," he reported. "Multiple copies, encrypted. The police have confirmed chain of custody. The press hasn't seen it yet." Alexander nodded. "Good. Keep it that way until I say otherwise." One of the lawyers, a sharp woman in her 30s, adjusted her glasses. "Sir, there's also the matter of the online chatter. Someone leaked partial information about the attack. Social media engagement has exploded, thousands of comments, mostly speculation." Alexander's gaze shifted toward Lucas. "Trace the source." "Oh," Lucas replied. "We already did. It leads to an offshore server connected to a PR agency registered in Miami under the name Drake Media." A quiet murmur rippled through the room. Alexander spoke again, his tone cutting through the noise. "Selena Drake!" Lucas nodded. "Yes, it's her company. We checked the financial logs. The account was funded by Cross Holdings 3 weeks ago." For a brief second, Alexander closed his eyes. He had expected betrayal, but seeing it confirmed in numbers and contracts still pierced through the armor he wore. "So Nathaniel paid for the machine that destroyed him," he said quietly. The lawyer looked uneasy. "Sir, if we expose that connection, it will completely destroy his business. The fallout could be massive." "Good," Alexander replied. "That is the point." He turned toward the window. The skyline shimmered faintly through the clouds. Manhattan looked beautiful from this height, but he knew beauty here was built on ruthlessness. Every tower, every success story had its shadows, and he was done letting those shadows consume his family. "Begin full-scale investigation," he said finally. "Freeze every account tied to Drake Media. Contact our cybersecurity division and prepare a dossier for the district attorney. I want them cornered before they realize they are being hunted." Lucas glanced up from his screen. "That might take a day or two." Alexander looked over his shoulder. "Then you have 12 hours. The room went silent. No one argued. When Alexander Hartman set a deadline, it was law. As the team dispersed to carry out his orders, Lucas lingered. "Sir," he said softly, "I have to ask, are you sure you want to handle this personally? The situation's already volatile. Amelia's recovery should be your focus." Alexander gave a faint, tired smile. "My daughter will recover. I intend to make sure the world she wakes up to is safe enough for her to live in." He picked up his coat and motioned for Lucas to follow. Together they stepped into the private elevator. As the doors closed, the reflection of their faces merged with the city beyond the glass. When they reached the lobby, reporters had already gathered outside the revolving doors. Microphones rose like bayonets, flashing lights cutting through the glass. Questions shouted over one another. "Mr. Hartman, is it true your daughter was attacked by your son-in-law's mistress? Is Amelia Hartman pressing charges? Will you comment on the viral footage?" Alexander didn't pause. His security detail cleared a path through the chaos. The sound of camera shutters followed him into the waiting car. Once the door closed, the world outside faded into silence again. Inside the Mercedes, Lucas pulled up the latest data on his tablet. "Selena Drake just posted a statement," he said. "She's denying everything. Calls it a smear campaign orchestrated by powerful people trying to protect their image." Alexander almost laughed. "She thinks she understands power, but she's confusing it with attention." Lucas tilted the screen toward him. "It's gaining traction. Hashtags are trending. People love scandal." Alexander leaned back in his seat. eyes on the wet city streets sliding past the window. Then we give them truth. The only thing stronger than gossip is proof. By late afternoon, Hartman Capital's crisis room came alive. Dozens of screens displayed live social media feeds, legal documents, and transaction histories. Alexander's analysts worked in shifts, tracing every connection between Drake Media and Cross Holdings. Slowly, the web began to take shape. Transfers, encrypted messages, invoices marked with falsified dates. The pattern was clear. It was a campaign built on manipulation and greed. Lucas stood beside him as the final report compiled. "This is everything," he said quietly. "If we release it, the public will see how deep it goes." Alexander studied the data. "Not yet. Timing is everything. We wait until she thinks she's won." That night, Selena Drake sat in her Tribeca loft, surrounded by flickering candles and glowing screens. Her reflection danced in the dark window as she scrolled through headlines that painted her as the victim. She smiled to herself, sipping wine. "He won't touch me," she murmured. "Men like Alexander Hartman don't fight in the dirt." Across town, Alexander watched her feed on a surveillance monitor. The same smirk she wore online was now frozen on his screen. He pressed his finger lightly against the image. "You shouldn't mistake silence for mercy," he whispered. Lucas entered the control room. "Sir, everything is ready. The files are encrypted, verified, and time-stamped. Once we send them to the DA, there's no turning back." "Huh." Alexander's reflections stared back at him from the dark glass of the screen. "Then send them," he said. Lucas hit the key. The system processed the data and uploaded it to a secure server. Within seconds, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office received an automatic alert labeled Priority, Corporate Malfeasance, Domestic Assault, Cover-Up. It was done. The first strike had been launched. Alexander closed his laptop and stood at the window, watching the city lights blur into the mist. "They wanted a war of perception," he said softly. "Now they'll get a war of truth." Outside, thunder rolled again, low and distant. Somewhere beneath that same storm, Nathaniel Cross sat in his corner office, unaware that the ground beneath his empire was already beginning to crack. And in a quiet hospital room across town, Amelia stirred in her sleep, her hand resting gently on her stomach. She did not know that her father had just pulled the first thread in a net that would soon tighten around every name responsible for her pain. The Plaza Hotel had never looked brighter. Its chandeliers sparkled like frozen constellations suspended above the marble floor, and the music from the orchestra floated through the air like smoke. Manhattan's elite filled the grand ballroom in gowns and tuxedos, glasses of champagne glittering under the light. But for Alexander Hartman, this gala was not about celebration. It was bait. The annual Hartman Foundation Charity Gala had always been a symbol of prestige, but this year it carried a silent purpose. Every media outlet, investor, and socialite in the city had been invited. Every camera was ready. Every detail, from the seating chart to the lighting design, had been arranged by Lucas Reed with surgical precision. At the top of the staircase, Amelia Hartman paused. The soft blue gown she wore flowed like water around her as she placed a careful hand over her belly. It had been only 2 weeks since she left the hospital, and though her body still ached, she stood tall. Her presence alone was a quiet act of defiance. Beside her stood Lucas, dressed in a black tuxedo, eyes scanning the crowd below. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" he asked gently. Amelia nodded. "I need to be. If I hide, they win." The two descended the staircase together. As she reached the bottom, heads turned. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Some murmured admiration, others curiosity. The tabloids had painted her as fragile, but the woman walking among them looked anything but. Across the ballroom, Alexander greeted guests with a calm smile that did not reach his eyes. His gaze followed Amelia's every step. The orchestra shifted to a softer melody as he made his way to the stage. Cameras tilted upward. The host introduced him with the usual applause, but the air was tense. Everyone knew something was coming, even if they didn't know what. "Good evening," Alexander began, his voice amplified across the vast hall. "For years, the Hartman Foundation has been committed to supporting those who have been silenced. But tonight, silence itself will end." A murmur spread through the audience. Reporters lifted their phones. Alexander gestured toward the massive projection screen behind him. Before we speak of charity, we must speak of truth. The lights dim. The music stopped. On the screen, grainy black and white footage appeared. The waiting room of Lenox Hill Hospital. Gasps filled the air. The audience watched as Selena Drake entered the frame, her face sharp and smug. The push came a moment later, sudden and deliberate. The sound of Amelia's cry echoed through the ballroom like a haunting refrain. Amelia stood frozen beside Lucas, her hands trembling slightly. Even though she had lived that moment, seeing it replayed before hundreds of strangers made her heart pound. On the stage, Alexander's voice cut through the silence. "This is the woman who called it a misunderstanding." The camera zoomed in on Selena's face. The crowd turned as if summoned by invisible force. There she was, standing near the bar in a gold sequined dress, her expression frozen in disbelief. All eyes locked on her. Cameras flashed. A reporter whispered, "That's her." Selena's lips parted. "This is edited," she shouted. "It's fake." Lucas stepped forward, holding up a printed document. "Verified by the hospital and the NYPD," he said loudly. 3 independent analysts authenticated the footage. The room erupted in noise. Journalists moved closer, shouting questions. Selena's carefully constructed world began to crumble with every camera flash. Amelia felt the weight of it all pressing on her chest. She took a breath, steadying herself. Then she turned toward Selena, her voice calm but firm. "You said I was weak," she said softly. "You were wrong." Selena's eyes darted toward the exit, but 2 security guards stepped in her path. The orchestra had gone completely silent. Alexander stepped down from the stage, his gaze fixed on the woman who had nearly destroyed his family. "You walked into a hospital to humiliate my daughter," he said evenly. "Now the entire city knows who you really are." Selena's mask cracked. "You think you can ruin me? You think anyone will remember this in a month?" Alexander tilted his head slightly. "They will remember because I will make sure they do." The flashbulbs went off again, brighter this time. Reporters shouted questions, their voices overlapping in chaos. Selena pushed through them, her composure gone. Her agent slipped away. The photographers followed her until she vanished through the doors at the back of the ballroom. For a long moment, the crowd stood silent, stunned by what they had witnessed. Then applause began, hesitant at first, then growing louder. People stood, one by one, clapping for Amelia. Alexander returned to the stage. His voice steadied. "The truth is not revenge," he said. "It is justice. And tonight, the Hartman Foundation will double its commitment to protecting victims of violence. Every dollar raised this evening will go toward ensuring that what happened to my daughter never happens again." The applause became thunderous. Reporters captured every word. In that moment, Alexander was no longer just a businessman. He was a symbol of accountability. Amelia exhaled slowly, her body trembling with both exhaustion and relief. Lucas leaned closer. "It's done," he whispered. She shook her head slightly. "No, it's just beginning." "Oh?" Across the city, news stations interrupted programming with breaking alerts. Within minutes, the footage went viral. Headlines flooded social media. Hartman Gala exposes Mistress attack on pregnant wife. Comment sections exploded with outrage and sympathy. In a dark apartment downtown, Selena sat on the floor, her golden dress rumpled, makeup streaked down her face. Her phone buzzed endlessly with calls from journalists and sponsors cutting ties. She hurled it across the room. The screen shattered. Meanwhile, Nathaniel Cross stood in his high-rise office, watching the broadcast on a muted television. His reflection in the glass looked hollow. His empire, once built on confidence and illusion, was collapsing in real time. He picked up his phone and tried to call Selena, but the line went straight to voicemail. He left no message. There were no words left that could fix what he had allowed to happen. Back at the plaza, Amelia stood near the balcony overlooking the city. The night air was cool, the noise of the crowd fading behind her. She rested her hand over her belly and whispered, "We're safe now." Alexander joined her quietly, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You were brave tonight," he said. She looked up at him, eyes filled with gratitude. "You didn't just protect me, Dad. You showed the world who we are." He smiled faintly. "The world can watch all it wants. We're not hiding anymore." Below them, the city glittered like 1,000 new beginnings. For the first time in months, Amelia felt peace flicker in her chest. But somewhere beyond those lights, another storm was already forming. By dawn, Manhattan pulsed with noise. News anchors spoke over flashing graphics, headlines scrolled across television screens, and social media burned with one story: the Hartman Gala Exposé. Within hours, the footage from the Plaza Hotel had gone viral. Millions had seen it. Millions more had shared it. The name Selena Drake was no longer associated with glamour or power. It had become synonymous with cruelty. Inside Hartman Capitol Tower, the crisis room glowed with the light of dozens of screens. Analysts monitored live feeds, while the legal team drafted statements and organized interviews. The atmosphere was charged, part relief, part vigilance. Alexander Hartman stood in front of a wall-sized display showing news clips from across the country. Every outlet carried the same headline: Hartman family stands for truth. Lucas Reed entered with a tablet in hand. "It's official," he said. "Selena Drake's sponsors have dropped her. Her PR firm shut down within hours. The footage destroyed her credibility completely." Alexander didn't smile. "She'll lash out. People like her always do." Lucas nodded. "Already happening. She's gone live on her social media account, claiming she was framed. She's crying on camera, saying she was manipulated by a powerful billionaire family." The words made Alexander's jaw tighten. "Then she leaves us no choice." He turned toward Lucas. "Release the audio." Lucas hesitated. "The confession?" "Yes," Alexander said simply. "The one recorded in her apartment. She admits everything." Lucas uploaded the file to every major media outlet. Within minutes, the sound of Selena's own voice echoed across the airwaves. "Of course I pushed her. She deserved it. She took everything from me." The public reaction was instant. Hashtags shifted from outrage to fury. Every network replayed the clip in loops, contrasting it with her tearful denials. Within an hour, sponsors not only cut ties, but issued statements condemning her behavior. Alexander watched it unfold in silence. The satisfaction he felt was tempered by something deeper. He had not wanted spectacle, only truth. Yet truth, once unleashed, had its own appetite. In the hospital suite across town, Amelia sat propped up in bed, watching the coverage on a muted television. The images were surreal: her father at the podium, the ballroom erupting in applause, Selena being escorted out. She saw herself in flashes of camera light, the woman the world now called brave. It didn't feel brave. It felt necessary. The door opened quietly. Lucas stepped in, still wearing the same black suit from the night before. "You shouldn't be watching that," he said gently. Amelia turned the volume down but didn't look away. "It's strange," she said. "Everyone sees it now, but I still feel like the world doesn't know the whole story." "They will," Lucas assured her. "Your father has everything under control." She smiled faintly. "That's what scares me." Lucas took a seat beside her. "He's doing what any father would do." Amelia glanced at him. "Maybe. But sometimes his version of love feels like vengeance." Lucas had no answer. He respected Alexander more than any man alive. But he had seen the side of him that frightened even his enemies, the part that turned emotion into strategy. Across the city, the chaos was spreading. In a downtown apartment filled with the remnants of a shattered life, Selena Drake sat in front of her laptop, mascara smeared across her face. Her phone buzzed endlessly with missed calls from reporters and lawyers. She clicked through online comments until her hands trembled. Every word was poison. Every post another reminder that her empire was gone. She slammed the laptop shut and grabbed her phone. "He thinks he can ruin me," she muttered. "Let's see how perfect his family looks when I'm finished." She opened a new message to a contact labeled Insider. Her fingers flew across the screen. "I have documents proving Hartman Capital manipulated media coverage. You'll get everything if you protect me." Then she hit send. That afternoon, Lucas's cybersecurity team intercepted the leak attempt. He rushed into Alexander's office with a pale expression. "She's trying to flip the narrative," he said quickly. "She just sent files to several journalists, claiming you used money to control public opinion. She's painting this as a war of corruption." Alexander didn't flinch. "What kind of files?" "Fake ones," Lucas said. "Doctored transactions and emails. She's desperate." Alexander leaned forward. "Then we starve her of oxygen, remove her access, block every route she has left. No money, no platform, nothing." "Yes, sir." As Lucas left, Alexander turned toward the window. The city glimmered below, beautiful and indifferent. He had spent a lifetime mastering the rules of power, but watching Amelia nearly die had changed him. Power now had purpose. By evening, the fake documents Selina released were publicly disproven. Journalists who had published them retracted their stories and apologized. But the damage she had hoped to inflict turned inward. Her reputation was beyond repair. At the same time, Alexander's team launched a campaign of truth. Verified documents, police statements, and court filings flooded the internet. The narrative was no longer one of rumor. It was fact. The Hartman family stood for integrity, while their enemies drowned in exposure. Inside Hartman Capital's control room, Lucas watched the numbers climb. "Public sentiment is at 90% in your favor," he said. Donations to the Hartman Foundation tripled overnight. Alexander's expression remained neutral. "Good. Then let's turn this attention into something that lasts. Every voice that cheered for us tonight must stand for something real tomorrow." He turned toward his communications director. "Prepare a statement. Make it clear this isn't revenge, it's reform. Announce a new program for victims of abuse, starting with a grant in Amelia's name." The director nodded. "Understood, sir." Later that night, Amelia watched her father's televised speech. He spoke calmly, his words deliberate. "Justice is not about winning," he said. "It's about protecting what should never have been harmed." She felt tears gather in her eyes. For the first time since the attack, she believed him. In the dim glow of her hospital room, she whispered to her unborn child, "Your grandfather's not a perfect man, but he's fighting for something right." Outside, the city lights shimmered against the rain-slick streets. Somewhere beyond those towers, Selina Drake packed her bags, her reflection fractured in a cracked mirror. "They think this is over," she said softly, "but they haven't seen the last of me." The rain began again, tapping against the glass like a quiet warning. And in his office, high above the city, Alexander Hartman stood alone, the skyline stretching endlessly before him. The storm he had unleashed was beginning to settle, but deep down he knew storms never truly ended. They only changed direction. Tomorrow, it might strike again. The morning sky over Manhattan was pale and cold, streaked with thin clouds that glowed like silver scars. Outside the New York County Supreme Court, cameras lined the marble steps. Reporters shouted over each other, flashes cutting through the chill air. The trial everyone had been waiting for was about to begin. Inside a black SUV parked at the curb, Amelia Hartman sat quietly between her father and Lucas Reed. Her hands rested over her belly, steady but tense. The hum of reporters outside felt distant, like the sound of an approaching storm. She looked out the tinted window and saw a sea of faces, curious, hungry, waiting to consume her story. Alexander glanced at her and spoke softly. "You don't owe anyone a show, just the truth." Amelia nodded. "That's all I have left." When the car door opened, the noise hit them like a wave. Security formed a line, guiding them through the crowd and into the courthouse. Shouts echoed behind them. "Amelia, how do you feel facing Selina today?" "Mr. Hartman, is this about justice or revenge?" Alexander kept walking, his expression unreadable. Inside, the courtroom was grand and austere, its walls lined with dark wood panels polished to a mirror sheen. A faint smell of old paper and perfume lingered in the air. At the front, the judge's bench loomed beneath the state seal. The gallery was packed with journalists, attorneys, and spectators. Every seat was taken. Amelia took her place at the plaintiff's table. Lucas sat beside her, his tablet ready with files and exhibits. Across the aisle, Selina Drake sat at the defense table, her once perfect posture replaced by nervous stiffness. Her gold hair was tied back, her face pale under the courtroom lights. Behind her, Nathaniel Cross sat with his own legal team, shoulders hunched, eyes fixed on the floor. When Judge Patterson entered, the room fell silent. "Court is now in session," he announced, voice echoing off the marble. "The People versus Selina Drake, with Nathaniel Cross named as cooperating witness." The prosecutor, a woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, stood. "Your Honor, we will present evidence that proves beyond question the defendant intentionally assaulted Mrs. Amelia Hartman, causing trauma and endangerment to both her and her unborn child. We will also show that Mr. Cross knowingly funded and concealed this act." Selina's lawyer rose immediately. "Objection, Your Honor. My client acted under emotional distress. This was a tragic misunderstanding fueled by jealousy, not a premeditated attack." The judge raised his hand. "Objection noted. Proceed." The prosecutor nodded and turned to the jury. "Let us begin with the facts." The first piece of evidence appeared on the courtroom screen, the hospital security footage. The same video the world had already seen at the gala. Yet in this quiet courtroom, its impact felt heavier. The push, the fall, the nurses rushing in, gasps rippled through the gallery. Selina's face twisted as the clip replayed. She whispered something to her lawyer, who shook his head slowly. The prosecutor spoke again. "The defendant claims it was an accident, but the footage shows otherwise. The shove was deliberate. The result was nearly fatal." Next came the audio recording. Selina's voice filled the courtroom. "Of course I pushed her. She deserved it. She took everything from me." The sound was raw, venomous. Reporters scribbled furiously. Someone in the gallery muttered under their breath. The judge banged his gavel. "Order in the court." Selina shot to her feet. "That was edited," she shouted. "You don't understand what I meant." Her lawyer pulled her back down, whispering, "Stop talking." The prosecutor continued calmly. "We also have verified financial records. Payments from Cross Holdings to Drake Media, labeled as consulting fees, totaling $50,000. Those payments were made just days before the attack." All eyes turned to Nathaniel. He looked cornered, his tie slightly askew. The prosecutor addressed him. "Mr. Cross, did you authorize these transfers?" Nathaniel's throat moved as he swallowed. "Yes," he said quietly. "Did you know they were used to fund false media campaigns and to suppress witnesses?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Cameras clicked. Alexander's expression didn't change, but his hand clenched slightly on the armrest. Amelia closed her eyes for a moment, steadying herself. The defense attorney rose quickly. "Your Honor, my client was manipulated by Mr. Cross. He used her feelings against her. She never intended harm." The prosecutor replied. "Intent is clear from her own words. She confessed freely. No one forced her to act." "Who?" Judge Patterson gestured toward Amelia. "Mrs. Hartman, would you like to make a statement?" Amelia stood slowly, supported by Lucas's steady hand. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. "I didn't come here for vengeance," she said. "I came because no woman should fear for her life inside a hospital. No one should believe that money or lies can erase cruelty. I just want peace for my child and for every woman who has been silenced by power." The room was silent. Even the reporters stopped typing. Selina stared at her, tears burning at the corners of her eyes. For a brief moment, something human flickered in her expression. Then she looked away. The judge nodded solemnly. "Thank you, Mrs. Hartman." As the proceedings continued, the evidence stacked higher and higher. Testimonies from nurses, forensic analysts, and security staff all painted the same picture. The attack was deliberate, the cover-up real. When the final witness stepped down, Judge Patterson announced a recess before closing arguments. The crowd spilled into the hallway like a wave of noise. Reporters called after Alexander, but he ignored them. Inside a quiet conference room, he placed a hand on Amelia's shoulder. "You did well," he said softly. "Your strength spoke louder than anything I could have done." Amelia looked up at him. "I'm not strong. I'm just tired of being afraid." He smiled faintly. "That's strength." Outside, the city buzzed with the sound of news vans and sirens. Across town, Selina's lawyer was already preparing her final plea. But deep down, everyone in that courtroom knew the verdict was inevitable. As the recess ended, Alexander glanced at Lucas. "Tomorrow, this will be over." Lucas nodded, one way or another. When they re-entered the courtroom, the lights seemed brighter, the air thicker. Amelia sat once more at the table, her hands folded over her belly. The judge's gavel struck. "Court will reconvene tomorrow for closing statements," Judge Patterson declared. The sound echoed through the room like the first toll of justice approaching. And for the first time since the attack, Amelia allowed herself to breathe without fear. Tomorrow, the world would finally hear the truth in full. The morning of the verdict began with an eerie calm. Outside the New York County Supreme Court, the air was sharp and clear, the kind that made every sound travel farther. Reporters had gathered before sunrise, Satellite trucks lined the street, their antennas pointed toward the sky like waiting spears. The world wanted closure. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with tension. The wooden benches were filled to capacity, and the hum of whispered conversations created a low tremor that seemed to vibrate through the walls. Every journalist, every observer, every stranger who had followed the Hartman scandal sat on the edge of their seats. Amelia Hartman entered quietly through the side door. She wore a simple cream suit that softened her figure and emphasized her calm presence. Her father followed close behind, his expression controlled. Yet beneath that composure lived the exhaustion of a man who had carried both fury and love for too long. Lucas Reed was already there, arranging files at the table, his face set with focus. Across the aisle, Selina Drake sat between two defense lawyers. Her once flawless appearance was gone. The gold in her hair had faded, her eyes red from nights without sleep. Beside her, Nathaniel Cross stared blankly at the floor, the image of a man watching his own downfall in slow motion. When Judge Patterson entered, the room fell silent. The sound of the gavel striking wood echoed like thunder. "Court is now in session," he declared. The prosecutor rose first. "Your Honor, members of the jury, the evidence presented leaves no doubt. This was not an accident, not a moment of emotional loss. It was deliberate harm. The defendant, Miss Selina Drake, endangered a pregnant woman and attempted to manipulate the narrative through deceit and corruption. Justice must speak clearly today." The defense attorney followed, his voice steady but hollow. "Miss Drake is not a monster. She acted out of pain, confusion, and emotional desperation. She has already suffered the loss of her career and reputation. I ask for compassion." Judge Patterson nodded. "The jury has reached a decision." Every breath in the courtroom seemed to stop. The forewoman of the jury stood, holding a folded paper. Her hands trembled slightly as she read aloud. "In the matter of the People versus Selina Drake, we find the defendant guilty of third-degree assault and intentional infliction of emotional distress." Gasps erupted across the room. Cameras clicked. Selina covered her mouth, shaking her head. "No," she whispered. "That's not possible." The judge continued, unmoved. "Miss Drake is hereby sentenced to 1 year in county jail with probation and mandatory psychological counseling." Selina stood abruptly, tears streaming down her face. "1 year? You can't do this to me. I'm not the villain here." The gavel struck again. "Sit down, Miss Drake." She sank back into her chair, her sobs echoing in the silence. Then the judge turned toward Nathaniel. "Mr. Cross, though you cooperated with the investigation, your actions contributed to the concealment of evidence and defamation of character. You are hereby ordered to pay $2.5 million in restitution and perform 6 months of community service under court supervision." Nathaniel's shoulders slumped. He nodded weakly, his voice barely audible. "Yes, Your Honor." The courtroom erupted in noise again. Reporters rushed for the doors to deliver the breaking story. Photographers captured every angle. The fall of the Mistress, the collapse of the Millionaire, the calm endurance of the pregnant wife. Amelia sat motionless. The verdict washed over her like a wave she had waited months to reach. She didn't feel triumph. She felt release. Beside her, Alexander reached for her hand. "It's over," he whispered. She shook her head gently. "No, Dad. Justice is never over. It just moves from one heart to another." Outside, the courthouse steps had become a storm of flashing lights and shouting voices. Security guided the family through the crowd. Questions rained down. "Mrs. Hartman, do you forgive them? Mr. Hartman, will there be an appeal?" Amelia paused for a moment at the top of the stairs. The winter sun caught the edges of her hair, and her hand instinctively rested on her belly. "Forgiveness is not mine to give," she said softly. "It belongs to time." The cameras clicked in unison. For that 1 second, she looked less like a victim and more like a symbol. Back inside, Selina was led away in handcuffs. The weight of the metal around her wrists was heavier than she had imagined. Reporters pressed against the glass walls, snapping photos as she was escorted through the hallway. She shouted once, "They're lying! He helped me," pointing toward Nathaniel. But no one listened. Nathaniel sat alone at the defense table, staring at the empty chair beside him. His lawyer spoke quietly. "You should go. There's nothing left to do." He nodded slowly, then looked toward the plaintiff's table where Amelia had been moments earlier. He whispered under his breath, "I'm sorry." But apologies had lost their meaning. Later that afternoon, inside the quiet of the hospital where it had all begun, Amelia walked the corridor lined with windows that looked out over the city. The same city that had once mocked her now celebrated her courage. She didn't care about the headlines. She cared about breathing again. Alexander joined her, carrying a folder filled with donation receipts. "The foundation received another $500,000 today," he said. "People are responding." Amelia smiled faintly. "Then maybe something good came out of all this." Her father nodded. "Good always comes from truth, even when it costs more than we expect." They stopped in front of the nursery wing. Behind the glass, newborns slept beneath soft blankets. Amelia's eyes filled with tears. "Soon," she whispered. "Just a few more weeks, and I'll hold mine." Alexander placed a hand on her shoulder. "He'll grow up knowing what strength looks like." "Not mine," she said softly. "Yours." He smiled, but there was sadness in his eyes. "Strength isn't about revenge, Amelia. It's about what we choose after justice is done." Outside the hospital, the sky turned gold as the sun began to set. News alerts flashed across every screen in Times Square. Selena Drake sentenced. Nathaniel Cross falls from grace. Hartman family triumphs in court. In the distance, sirens wailed faintly, merging with the rhythm of the city that never stopped moving. Amelia stood at the window and watched the skyline come alive with light. She pressed her hand to the glass and whispered, "We survived." At that same moment, inside a holding cell on Rikers Island, Selena sat on a narrow bench, staring at the floor. Her eyes were red, her mind racing with anger. When the guard handed her paperwork to sign, she noticed a small note scribbled at the bottom in unfamiliar handwriting. "You were right. There's still one secret left." Her pulse quickened. "Who wrote this?" she demanded. The guard shrugged. "It came with your file." Selena leaned back, clutching the paper, a faint smile creeping across her face. Then maybe it's not over after all. A month had passed since the verdict, and Manhattan had moved on to new scandals, new headlines, and new faces to dissect. But inside the Hartman penthouse overlooking Central Park, time moved differently. It was quieter here, softer, as if the chaos of the past months had been sealed outside the tall glass windows. Amelia Hartman stood by the window, her newborn son cradled in her arms. His name was Noah Alexander Hartman. His skin was pale and smooth, his tiny fingers curling and uncurling as if trying to grasp the world that awaited him. Amelia smiled through tired eyes. "You're safe now," she whispered. "You were born from pain, but you'll grow surrounded by love." The morning sunlight broke through the clouds, filling the room with a golden warmth. For the first time in a long time, the light didn't feel harsh. It felt healing. Behind her, Alexander entered carrying 2 cups of coffee. His steps were slower than before, his shoulders a little more relaxed. "He looks like you," he said softly, handing her a cup. Amelia smiled. "I think he has your eyes, the serious kind." Alexander chuckled quietly and took a seat on the couch. "Let's hope he uses them for better things than I did." For a moment, silence settled between them. It wasn't heavy like before. It was gentle, the kind that spoke of peace after war. On the coffee table lay a stack of newspapers, their front pages filled with photographs of the foundation's official opening. The Hartman Foundation for Maternal Safety had launched just 3 days earlier, and already donations had poured in from across the country. Hospitals called asking to join the program. Survivors sent letters of gratitude. The same city that had once whispered behind their backs now celebrated their courage. Amelia adjusted Noah in her arms. "Mom would have loved this," she said. Alexander's gaze softened. "Your mother always believed that pain should be used, not wasted. She would be proud of you." A knock on the door interrupted them. Lucas Reed stepped inside, still in his suit despite the early hour. "Sorry to intrude," he said, "but this couldn't wait." He placed an envelope on the table. It bore no return address, only Amelia's name written in neat black ink. She exchanged a glance with her father, then carefully opened it. Inside was a single photograph. Selena Drake, wearing an orange prison jumpsuit, stared straight into the camera. On the back of the photo, a short message was written in the same handwriting. "She's not the only one who paid." Amelia felt her stomach tighten. "Who sent this?" Lucas shook his head. It was hand, delivered to my office. No fingerprints, no cameras catching who dropped it off. Alexander took the photo, studying it carefully. It's a warning, he said quietly. Someone wants us to know that what happened isn't buried. Amelia's arms instinctively tightened around her baby. I don't want this darkness around him, Dad. Not anymore. Alexander nodded slowly. And you won't. Let me handle it. Lucas hesitated. Should I alert security? Yes, Alexander said. Discreetly. I don't want panic, just vigilance. After Lucas left, Amelia sank onto the couch. Will it ever end? She asked. Alexander leaned forward, elbows on his knees. It ends when we stop letting fear write our story. The rest is just noise. He looked at his grandson and smiled faintly. That little boy is the reason the past won't win. Amelia nodded, her eyes shining. Then let's make sure he knows who he is. Later that afternoon, she visited the Foundation's headquarters for the first time since giving birth. The building stood tall and glassy on Fifth Avenue, the Hartman name etched in silver above the entrance. Inside, the lobby smelled of fresh paint and lilies. Journalists and donors gathered for interviews and tours, their voices filled with admiration. When Amelia entered the main hall, applause broke out. She smiled shyly and walked to the podium, Noah resting in a white blanket in her arms. When I stood in a hospital bed not long ago, she began, I thought my life had ended. I thought pain had won. But pain only wins when we stop fighting. My son and I are living proof that even after darkness, there is light waiting to return. Her words drew a standing ovation. Cameras flashed, but Amelia no longer flinched. Every flash now felt like validation, not intrusion. After the event, Alexander stood with her in front of the building's glass facade. The city reflected around them like a living mirror. You turned everything they tried to destroy into something that saves lives, he said quietly. That's legacy, Amelia. She smiled. No, Dad, that's redemption. Evening fell gently over Manhattan. In the penthouse, Amelia rocked Noah to sleep while the city lights flickered to life beyond the windows. She hummed softly, the same lullaby her mother had once sung to her. When the baby's breathing steadied, she rose and placed him in his crib, then turned toward the window. Her phone buzzed on the table. A message from an unknown number. She hesitated before opening it. The screen displayed a short video. It was footage from the courtroom showing Selena's confession. But near the end, the camera shifted. For a brief second, it captured a man standing at the back of the hallway, half hidden by shadow. He smiled faintly at the lens before disappearing from view. Beneath the video, a text appeared. The one who made sure you survived. Amelia stared at it, her pulse quickening. She typed back with trembling fingers. Who are you? The reply came instantly. Someone who still believes in justice. She lowered the phone slowly. Outside, the wind stirred the trees in Central Park, whispering through the night. For the first time, she didn't feel fear. She felt curiosity and strength. Whoever the stranger was, they had watched her story unfold, maybe even protected her in ways she didn't understand. Alexander entered the room a few minutes later, glancing at the baby. Asleep? Amelia nodded. Finally. He stepped beside her, looking out over the skyline. Your mother used to say the world doesn't notice how strong you are. It only notices when you stand up again. Amelia smiled softly. Then maybe that's what all of this was for. She turned toward him, her eyes bright with quiet determination. No more running, no more hiding. We move forward. And Alexander placed a hand on her shoulder. Together, they stood side by side, watching the horizon. The first hints of dawn began to color the sky with rose and gold. The city stirred below, alive and restless, but within the Hartman home, there was peace. As sunlight spilled into the room, Amelia whispered to her sleeping son, You will grow up knowing the truth, not the headlines, the real story. Behind her, Alexander smiled. That's the only story worth telling. Outside, the day began anew. The storms had passed. The wounds had turned to wisdom. And in that golden light, the Hartman family finally found what they had been chasing all along. Not revenge, not victory, but peace that stayed.